Welcome to another episode of American Dish. Today's episode is a little bit different. We are running an interview that I did for the other podcast I'm on. I co host a podcast called Forked, which is all about food politics, that's produced by the Food and Environment Reporting Network. You should definitely go check it out. Just search Forked wherever you get your podcasts. My co host, Theodore Ross, and I interviewed Vani Hari in late January. Vani Hari is known to many as the food babe. She has been a blogger on food issues for more than 15 years. She's amassed a really big following, which she lovingly calls the Food Babe Army. They have, with their army, gone after food companies to get rid of all kinds of ingredients. She is very into pressuring food companies to get rid of controversial ingredients, particularly focusing on ingredients that might not be allowed in other countries. Vani Hari has been doing this for a long time. I've been covering her for a long time, but now she is very powerful within the MAHA movement. She is a key voice, an advocate, an activist within that movement. And so Ted and I wanted to talk to her about, what's going on with MAHA, where she sees things going. We went into like how she went from being a somewhat obscure food blogger to being a power broker within MAHA. Like, how did that happen? We talked about why she didn't go into the administration, why she actually hates politics, which is kind of funny because now she's at the center of some pretty big political fights. We talked about her personal story, her personal health journey. We talked about why she thinks the dietary guidelines is such a big deal. And we get into this really big issue within MAHA. There's a big fight over glyphosate. I do want to note that we recorded this episode with Vani before the executive order came out from President Trump, which came out a couple of weeks ago and really lit this whole thing on fire. So basically, the White House said they want to invoke the Defense Production Act to produce more glyphosate domestically. Of course, MAHA hates glyphosate, would rather EPA ban it or at least restrict its use. And so seeing an executive order from Donald Trump, to say that it infuriated MAHA is really putting it mildly, I think. We have seen a full-blown public fight over this. A lot of MAHA advocates have been furious with the administration, and they were particularly mad that HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Has defended this executive order publicly, even though he has also been clear that he believes glyphosate causes cancer. EPA has long maintained that it doesn't. We get into some of that, but I just wanted to note that when we do talk about glyphosate in this episode with Vani, it predates the most recent chapter in that fight. We also did not get into, she is now organizing a big rally at the Supreme Court that's set for April 27th when oral arguments begins. So that is also a new development. And if you want to follow all of this, you really just have to go on X because that is where a lot of the fighting over glyphosate happens. With all that said, I think this is still a really good conversation with Bonnie. We get into so many of the big themes within MAHA, and I think it's helpful for anyone who's trying to understand where MAHA is coming from. Vani Hari also used to be a Democrat, so she brings kind of an interesting, I think, political evolution into MAHA. And even though she says she hates politics many times in this conversation, she is, as I said, right in the middle of it. So I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Welcome back to Forked. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? I'm excited about our guest today.
Yes, Vani, welcome. We are so thrilled to have you here and have a nice chat about the food and the politics.
There's so much going on.
Helena, you're up first. Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, okay, so I wanted to actually bring us back to the spring because I have this very clear memory. I should probably say first that, like, I've covered Vani Hari for, I don't know, 15 years. Like, you've been on the food radar for a long time. I think you call yourself public enemy number one of the food industry, and I think that's true. Like, a lot of
I
my
didn't say
sources
that.
in the food industry hate
I
you.
didn't
Yeah.
name myself that. That was the New York Times.
Okay. So, but I think, like, there's truth to that. Like, I definitely hear from folks in the industry that, like, you drive them nuts. Like, they do not they do not like you. And when one of my most vivid memories covering this administration is last spring when you were on the lawn of the White House with FDA Commissioner Marty McCary, and you were doing TV hits side by side, like, together. You posted on X, "Dear food industry, I know you didn't wanna do this, but it's okay. You'll have to anyway. I hope you enjoy this clip of me on the White House lawn with the head of FDA. Love Food Babe and her army." And this was about food dyes, of course. This was, like, a big deal. The administration's trying to phase these out. They did not ban them, but they are pushing the industry to phase these out. Can you just talk let's just start there. How did you go from, like, this loathed food blogger building this audience, this army, to the power that you now hold in this movement and in this administration? Like, you're standing there with the FDA commissioner. Like, how did this happen? Like, what is your elevator pitch for, how you got this power?
Yeah, it's I think it's just years and years and years of telling the truth and not being afraid to tell the truth and staying on the topic and being really clear about the ways the food industry has duped the American people, how they've used their ability to make money and put profits before people, and calling out the times where the food industry hasn't been held accountable, where they outright lied to people on the issue of artificial food dyes, how they in 2015 so many big food conglomerates like Mars and General Mills and Kellogg's all came out and said, we are going to remove artificial food dyes, got worldwide press about it, and then literally went back on their commitment, and nobody was holding them accountable. Nobody in Washington, there was no politician, there was no nonprofit organization doing anything about the fact that they lied to the American public. And I think it's just this is one of those things that when you learn the truth about how American food companies can reformulate their products with better, safer ingredients in other countries and take out these artificial food dyes and the exact same products that they're selling here in the United States, you can't look away. There's no way that doesn't make you mad when you see the side by side images of Fruit Loops in Korea and India and China and Canada and Australia and all of Europe that doesn't have artificial food dyes, and it has it here in the United States. It's like, what are we doing to our own children? And seeing those side by side comparisons, which, when I first did the investigation on US foods versus Europe and the rest of the world, it was 2013. So it's like 13 years ago that I did that initial investigation where I did the side by side images, and I compared everything from, Quaker oatmeal to McDonald's french fries to cereals to, yogurts, all kinds of things. And it was the blog post that went the most viral because people were upset. And at the beginning of that blog post, I put the stats that are talked about every day now in this administration about how we are so sick, how we have so many chronic diseases, how the rates of diabetes and heart disease and cancer and everything just keep increasing. And we're not looking at the food. We're not looking at the chemicals we put in our food and how we've engineered our food to become addictive, and how our food is so different than the rest of the world that has better health outcomes, right?
Really quick, did it go viral at the time?
Yes.
Okay, so it went viral, like, 12 years ago, and then I do think this specific narrative of comparing American food ingredients to the same products in Canada or Europe was really potent during, like, the run up to the 2024 election. Like, you heard it a lot. Like, I remember you made this point at the Senate roundtable, the MAHA roundtable, like, the September before the 2024 election, and you got a standing ovation. Like, people were they were mad. They were like, "This is" like, it seemed like this very potent argument, but it is interesting that, like, you were talking about this 12 years ago, and now it has sort of taken on a life of its own, and, like, we should also say the reason those ingredients are different is because, like, FDA has not they allow those, like, they've determined they're safe or they're grass or so there is, like, a regulatory reason for that. But I'm curious, like, with all of this new focus from the administration, and, like, you're obviously very close with these folks, like, standing on the White House lawn, you were there when Kennedy and McCary announced that they were gonna phase these out at HHS, did you ever think about going into the administration? Like, or why I guess why didn't you? Like, couldn't you have been running food over at, FDA? I mean, Kyle Diamantis obviously has that role, but, why didn't you go in?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It's probably because I hate politics.
Well, but wait,
You
Um,
hate
wait, I wanna answer that.
politics?
This is politics. When we're talking about being on the lawn of the
Yeah,
White House,
yeah.
I
that
Oh,
is
I
she's like,
know.
100%
"I know." Yeah.
politics, you
It
know?
is a love-hate battle
Ooh,
every single day of my life. You don't know how many times I've wanted to just quit being a food activist this year in the last
really?
yes, in the last year,
Go
Well,
because
online,
it's
it
wait,
is
so
let me ask you
terrible.
hard,
about that. I wanna
and
ask you about it. So,
yeah,
give us an
sure.
example of what made you wanna quit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, in politics, there's never anything that so much negotiation happening behind the scenes with all of the interested parties that you have to compromise. And I just don't like compromising. I like getting
Yeah.
my way. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
It's
for
good to be
my
clear
Yes.
about that,
for
to
my
know that, yeah.
personality type, it's
Mhm.
really hard
Mm.
to do that and to be in that position day in and day out and almost muzzle yourself in a way, right? And that's just the reality of it. There's no like I don't think we're ever going to solve that until we get rid of the two-party system, right? And so that two-party system situation is bigger than my realm of influence, I feel like. And so given what we have, it becomes very frustrating. And there have been times, for example, within the last year where nonprofits who I have loved and worked with and tirelessly linked to and promoted and set people there on Giving Tuesday and all of that, that they won't get involved in some of the things that are happening now because the other party is leading the conversation. And that's very frustrating. And I am of the ideology that if you have an opening, if you have home court advantage, if you have the opportunity to make a change, you should do it. You should gather your forces. You should get everybody together, collaborate, create a coalition. Let's get this done while everybody's paying attention for the first time ever,
But
right?
is that an
And
absolute? I mean, like, if you're those nonprofits that are unwilling to step in because it's the Trump administration, that may be connected to other issues related to the Trump administration, right? So how do you
where?
make that kind of decision? This
Yeah,
is something here's these other things happening in the world of Trump that maybe I don't have any position on, maybe I don't agree with, maybe I do agree with, I don't know. Uh, but I don't wanna get
right.
involved, right? That's not my thing. I'm here for for the food dyes and food health and that kinda stuff. How do you decide what makes it okay? And that really gets back to Helena's original question was, why are you not a part of the administration, right? How do you decide how far into the camp of the current administration you wanna get into, and when do you decide, "Well, no, that's too close for me?"
Yeah, I mean, again, I've kept all other topics, are off limits on Food Babe. Food Babe's the platform, my voice, everything has been solely focused on talking about processed foods, talking about how food is produced, how the food affects your body and your health. And it stems back from how I felt as a child where I ate every single processed food under the sun, was raised on processed food, raised on fast food because my parents, who were both teachers and immigrants, they came to the United States, they had nothing, and fast food was cheap and it was easy to feed us. And they had no idea that this food was bad for us or that it would eventually lead to health issues, which it did with me, where I ended up being on 9 prescription drugs by my early 20s, had 2 abdominal surgeries, one where I almost died. And so it's that situation that I think back at of like, there's so many Americans out there that are in this position, not feeling the best that they could feel because they don't know the truth about food. And I truly believe that, like, you don't even find your calling in life or like why you're meant to be here until you get your true health. Like, I don't feel like you serve God's purpose until you actually clean up your body and feel really super healthy. Like, I don't even feel like you can give back to the world because you're just surviving. You're just in your own misery and you don't even understand what you're able to give back to the world. And so, like, for me, health is the number one priority for everyone before anything. And so, for me, when I think about all the other politics going on in the world that I may or may not agree with, that is the thing that's my true North Star that I just keep focusing on. And it's the thing that I think also has made me able to be part of this administration without the backlash of politics in a way, not being part of the administration, but being a supporter of what they're doing. Because when I think about wholeheartedly what I want out of these next 3 years that we have left, I want the Make America Healthy Again movement to succeed more than anything, because this is our opportunity. We have the head of HHS, we have the head of FDA that knows what he's doing. We've got the head of US Foods that is, so far so good, a good guy that I've, had interactions with. I think we have a real opportunity to get things done in a way that we've never had before, where it takes the snail's pace of 10,
Decades,
15 years,
decades. Yeah.
decades to get
Yeah.
anything done. I mean, it took 30 years to ban one food dye, red number 3, which wasn't even in a lot of foods, right? It was in maraschino cherries and,
Yeah,
you
trans
know
fat took decades and
Yeah.
literally causes tens of thousands of premature deaths, which
Yes.
is yeah.
Yes. It just took so long, and it's like, if we can change the culture of how Americans eat in this short period of time, we've done quite a bit, right? If we can get them to eat more real food. I mean, just hearing Secretary Kennedy say that this week as part, last week, of the dietary guidelines announcement, and saying, we need to eat more real food. I mean, that is the crux of everything I've been working on, right? Like, if I would say there's just one goal in mind that I have through all the silly campaigns against yoga mat chemicals and artificial dyes and all of the things that I target to wake Americans up, it's to eat more real food. So I couldn't have thought of something more grandeur that coming from the government to, go out there and spread this culture across America and spread it across a group of people that have largely been asleep to these issues. And that's what I think is so good for this country. Like, me getting invited on Republican leaning podcasts and, the wives of people who are in the administration and and being part of this new group of people to educate them about what has happened to our food system and how it's been engineered, from everything to the texture, to the color, to the preservatives, to the flavorings, how everything is engineered against our senses so that we can't stop eating, and have them understand what a force we're up against, how PepsiCo has a robot in their in their science labs that mimic human taste buds so that we cannot,
It's
it's
us versus
completely
the robots. Yeah.
unacceptable. What? What'd you say?
It's us versus the robots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's us versus the robots, right? And it's like, how do we even stand a chance against that type of manipulation? And, like, if I can get this message out to a whole new group of people that have, these type, like, people like myself haven't been on those platforms, like, that is so good for American health. It's so good for all kinds of people. And I feel like we live in this divisive time where, social media especially is like almost created to create this ongoing fight about every single topic, and we're not supposed to know about how we feel about every single topic. Like, human beings aren't supposed to know about how everyone feels about a certain thing. It's like, it's too much information. You should learn about your friends and what they think by speaking to them and having conversation, not like these 1 minute viral clips on someone taken out of context or something. And it's such a messed up world. And I want to do everything in my power and my ability so that I can contribute in a positive way towards that. And if I can keep, like, bringing people back to this idea that, like, hello, without health you have nothing, who cares about all of this other stuff, right? Then they really come together in this kumbaya moment and they're like, yeah, I see it, Bonnie, I get it. And you don't know how many times I've had comments on social media and DMs and other things of, like, I can't believe you're doing this. I cannot believe you went to the White House. I cannot believe all of this, right? And it's like I fight back and I answer almost every single comment because I feel so strongly that like, who do you want in the White House fighting for better food? Do you want someone else there? Or would you rather have me, right? And when I even ask that question to my followers or the people who have been like, "Oh, I've followed you forever. I can't believe this," right? They kind of question themselves and they're like, "Wait a minute. Yeah, we do want you fighting for us, Bonnie, because you tell the truth and you're not scared to tell the truth."
All right, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. That's it. I mean, I'm gonna take in that answer. I'm gonna have to go listen to it after after we finish this recording and try to take in all the different things that you said. But let's talk about something that's we cover at Fern, the Food and Environment Reporting Network, a lot, which is Roundup. Right. So the Supreme Court has agreed to take on a case brought by Bayer where they want to suppress state bans on glyphosate, the chemical ingredient in Roundup, because they have not it doesn't include warnings for people that it may cause cancer, right? At the federal level, the EPA and its leader, Lee Zeldin, they are on the side of Bayer in this case, which is causing a split within this part of the Trump administration that you are adjacent to. I don't know how you put it, like you are in but not in. And there's been calls for Lee Zeldin to be fired and to step down. And I'm curious how you square that with the same thing that you just said about being on the inside, working with the administration, being the person that can sort of bridge the gap between Democrats and Republicans on these political issues as the federal government is going against what the MAHA movement really, really wants, which is one of the things that it really, really wants, which is for Roundup to be taken off the market and to be out of our food system and out of our foods.
Yeah. I mean, just to tell you that petition, firing anybody in any kind of position would not solve the issues that we have had decade after decade at the EPA. And I would say it was the frustration of the pesticide policy to date that led to that petition.
Because
And
they're approving new pesticides that
that's right. Yes,
environmentalists and health advocates are really concerned about. Yeah.
that's right. And so, you know, I think what's really important to recognize is that the EPA has failed to protect the public health when it comes to chemicals like glyphosate, as you mentioned. And signing that petition was really about elevating the urgency of the situation. And I think one of the things that, I feel personally responsible for is I didn't reach out to Lee before signing me that. And I think that was a huge mistake. I think that I should have sat down with him and talked to him about this bubbling up frustration that's happening within people who really believe in the MAHA movement.
Well, what would
And
that have done?
and there's
Speaking to Lee Zeldin, what would your goal been with that? I mean, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you don't think he should be fired, or you don't think anybody should be fired for these kinds of things, but what would speaking to Lee Zeldin do?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that, the EPA should understand is that when we have the president of the United States running on the issues of food and health and regulating chemicals and pesticides, which is something that he mentioned when he got together with Secretary Kennedy.
Yeah, mentioned often. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He tweeted recently on True Social, I can't remember the exact tweet, but it was something along the lines of like, I'm witnessing the mass poisoning of America. And I'm like, yes, yes,
Trump said that?
yes,
Oh,
he
I
did.
missed that.
Yes.
I'm not on Truth
Yeah, I don't use
Social. I
True
got
Social either.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
Um, and I was like, yes, you get it. You know what I mean? And so I think in order to serve the president in this way, the EPA really needs to take a new look at glyphosate. The information that we have gotten in the last 10 years is so much more on the side of real human impact. And we also know that when they made the designation that glyphosate doesn't cause cancer back in 2015, they were relying on a ghost written study that was cited, 800 times, I think, to show that glyphosate doesn't cause cancer, going against the International Agency for Research on Cancer and their designation. And when you're going against them, you better have really good science to back up what you're saying. And we now know that that science was not good. And so I would, urge him to take a strong stance on glyphosate and the human impacts that it does occur. And I also would say that politically, it is completely explosive and volatile to take any stance when it comes to a pesticide liability shield. And this has been an ongoing whack a mole type situation for the last year where it's been, state bills that come up that are trying to shield bear from these cases that they cause cancer. Then there is sections that are put into the spending bills that we have to go and fight. Then they're trying to do the farm bill that's coming up. That's going to be another fight. Then you
MAHA advocates did get it stripped from the spending bill,
That's
which
right.
was a huge, like, sign of power, I think, on the
Yes.
Hill, but you
Yes.
are right that there are more attempts coming. Yep.
There are more attempts coming, but if this administration knows what's good for them and they know what's good for MAHA to succeed, they know to get out of this fight right now. It does not serve them to take the stance of a foreign company like Bayer over the American people when it comes down to their product potentially causing cancer. And that's what needs to be done. And so I think, the general solicitor deciding to support the case with Bayer at the Supreme Court was a huge mistake. It's what broke the camel's back for so many advocates and why that petition occurred because it was a knee jerk reaction, right? But I think there's a real opportunity here because of what happened with that petition. It's almost like the EPA kind of woke up to, wait a minute, we should really be working together on figuring this out. And so they're now opening the door, having conversations with so many advocates.
Have you
And
been part of those meetings? I know there've been a lot of meetings.
yeah, I
Yeah.
am I am going to be actively involved in making sure that we get really meaningful results out of the EPA this year. I, I think there's some really amazing things that could happen, like for example, training farmers to remove their reliance on pre-harvest use of glyphosate. The percentage of glyphosate that's used in that way where they dry out the crops right before harvest is a very small percentage. They say it could be up to like 3% or maybe a little bit more, but and there's not like a ton of accurate data with that because not all farmers tell you that they're doing this and there's just not everybody reporting. But what scientists have found is that that small percentage of glyphosate being used for a drying agent so they can rotate the crops faster, that small percentage is actually 60 to 80% of humans' load and their impact. It's the reason why we have it in our urine. It's the reason why it's in breast milk. It's the reason why it's in oats and almonds and wheat in an extraordinary amount when it's being tested, right? And why you find it in things like Doritos and Cheerios and Quaker Oats. It's problematic because it's being sprayed at the last stage of the growth cycle and it's staying on the product and it's systematic at that point. You can't really wash it off. And so
So
this
you're
is
saying maybe targeting those uses
that's right.
would
I think
be
that could be a huge human health impact that we could have
like without banning it writ large.
without banning it, right? And there are not many nations that outright ban glyphosate. They
They're restricted.
restrict the use. Like,
Yeah.
for example, in Europe, they restrict this pre-harvest desiccation
So that's a
application.
kind
Mhm.
of
And
change,
I
a compromise coming out of the EPA that you could maybe and this is
Yeah.
sort of a leading que
And I don't even know if it's a
yeah,
compromise. I think telling the truth that glyphosate
right.
causes cancer and stopping this pre-harvest desiccation use, which is what is the most problematic for our exposure, those two things would be huge, right?
Yeah, and I do wanna interject just because we'll have listeners who are wanting this context, but, all the health authorities maintain that these uses pose no problems. They are not and they're not being found at levels that are over, like, the thresholds the EPA has set. However, I do think you can understand why consumers, when they read about, residues being found in things like Cheerios, which we give to kids, like, you can understand why there would be eyebrows raised about that or concerns or just sort of like, is there a way to reduce this? Is there a way to cut this back? Even if there isn't, hard science where EPA is like, "Oh boy, I mean, they're not
But I just
taking
wanna follow
action
up on
right now
this.
against these
Yeah.
uses." I just wanna
I
provide
just
that
I
context,
wanna
but,
follow up on this because
um
what we're talking about is a form of a negotiation with the EPA in time, and this leads to my next question, in time for the midterms, right? Right, that would be the idea that this could come out, something that the Trump administration could show to maybe some folks in the MAHA movement who are a little upset that these kinds of things didn't happen yet. And the question that I wanna get to is coming into the midterms, one of the narratives that Helena and I talk about on the show all the time is what is the nature of the MAHA movement politically? It is right at the moment, I think, pretty closely aligned with the Republican Party, but it seems, and I'm curious what you think about it because I'm not so sure. It seems that it may be up for grabs, right? Here comes the midterms. The MAHA moms, the MAHA movement haven't gotten what they were hoping for, maybe, depending on how you look at it. And
I think some things, but
right.
not others. They're mad at EPA for
I'm just
sure.
laying
Yeah.
out the narrative here.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
asserting things factually. I'm laying out a narrative of how it could be understood. And if they don't get what they want by the time of the midterms, they might swing back to the Democrats, right? What do you think of that? Because I'm not so sure. I think that the MAHA folks, at least the leadership, certainly, I don't know what the voters are going to do, but I think the leadership is staying quite firmly in the Republican Party. But I'm curious to hear your perspective. If things like what you're talking about at EPA don't happen, what happens?
Yeah. I think first of all, there cannot be this, amazing progress at HHS with this amazing collaborative effort that you have with other agencies happening, like with Brooke Rollins, where, you know, together with the dietary guidelines, they had this big moment and this big celebration of eat more real food and whole milk and all of these positive things coming out of the government and widely celebrated, more positive press than I've ever seen for the MAHA movement that week. Then you have, Secretary Duffy from the Transportation Department of Transportation work with Secretary Kennedy on the airports and that being a big, I just remember the big splash on social media. People loved that, right? Like that was just a huge moment of yes, we need gyms and airports. Yes, we need better airport food. Like everybody struggles with that, right? When they go travel and they just have to eat the shitty airport food, right? So it's like these moments of like huge wins. We haven't had that with the EPA yet, right? We haven't had that kumbaya moment of like everybody celebrating Zeldin and and I think there needs to be that. And I think there can be that moment. And I think right now the conversations are opening, which make me very hopeful and very positive in that respect. But to answer your question, I think when I think about the MAHA voter is extremely independent minded. And I think it's made up of super diverse voices out there. And they're people who are ones that are the most passionate about these issues. And when you look at polling on pesticides, it is one of the most popular positions
Bipartisan,
to take.
bipartisan,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Bipartisan, it is a 90 plus polling issue that is super popular. So for me, like again, I hate politics and I don't want to get
And
involved
yet
Here
here
we
you are,
are,
with
Vani.
talking about the
what
midterms.
all the things are. But I'll tell you this: if the Republicans know what's good for them, they should do something about this issue, right? Because it's so incredibly popular. And so if they want to ensure their victory in the midterms, this would be the one to focus on, in my opinion, because this is the one that gets everybody engaged and super excited. And I think would even sway some of the environmental folks that, have been a thorn in my side this year to maybe say, okay, well, we got something done. Maybe something nice will come from them. I don't know. We'll see.
One quick thing I want to ask you about on this, because it strikes me that, and we have talked about this a bit on this podcast, it strikes me that one of the reasons that there haven't been big MAHA wins at EPA is just the strength of the agriculture lobby in DC compared to like the food lobby. Like I have covered extensively over the years, kind of the crumbling of the food lobby, like GMA
And it
imploded.
crumbled. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
was like the
literally imploded.
the Grocery Manufacturers Association, which was, the former
Big food.
Consumer
Yeah.
Brands Association, right? I mean, that was just an abysmal failure, and then they try to come up with the Americans for Ingredient Transparency front group just recently, and that was, I think, a failure because
Well, we're
everyone.
gonna see. I'm like, yeah, I've been meaning to check in. Where's that bill?
Yeah,
Where's that bill? But the food lobby's been weakened a lot, but the farm lobby remains very strong, and they
they are.
really got a lot of pesticide discussion cut out of the MAHA strategy, right? Like there was a lot more talk of that in the initial MAHA report. So like, how do you see that? I mean, it strikes me that this administration is like it's a little easier to take on the food companies because they're in a weaker position, whereas, like, taking on the farm lobby is still, like, I mean, good luck, like, they just don't really lose. I think that kind of explains some of the
Despite the
difference. I don't know what you
popularity,
think about
the
that.
issues for food
Despite the
and the issues
popularity, yeah.
of pesticides, those have bipartisan support. People like that. They may not like vaccines, but they definitely
Yeah.
they want to get rid of the pesticides. They want to change the food system. But that ag industry, that ag lobby, they remain a lot stronger.
They are some of the most sophisticated forces in Washington that I've ever seen. And I've seen it all play out in different ways in that even the people who are in the administration have had dealings with, big agriculture companies. And it's like there's this systematic conflict of interest happening that hasn't been undone. I mean, I think what Secretary Kennedy has done in HHS has been extraordinary in trying to root out the conflicts of interest, but that work has not been done at the EPA or at the USDA. And so you have those two agencies that are riddled with, ex-lobbyists for these big food conglomerates, I'm sorry, chemical conglomerates who are selling agrochemicals. You have the farm bureaus who are doing their bidding because they're getting money from the agrochemical corporations. And so it's this like incestuous circle of influence that's happening and no one's been able to break through. And I think what has been frustrating is that, this movement is an anti-farmer or anti eating, farmed food. It's really about like saving our soil and saving human health and really impacting what's happening here in America when you look at the statistics and see that, we have 500% more glyphosate being sprayed on our land than in other countries. Why is that? Why do we use 25% of the world's pesticides, but we're only 3% of the world's population, right? So are we being systematically poisoned more than everywhere else? And at that point, it becomes an extreme disadvantage from a America First perspective, from a military perspective, from just a sheer might of our country, right? Like we have to look at those, and we have to realistically look at those. And some people say that like in 10 years we may not have any of these issues anymore because we'll have robots doing all the work in the farm fields.
That's
Maybe
what Brooke
that is
Rollins said. Yeah, she said that.
That
Yeah,
Oh, did she say
she said something along the line. She was questioned about immigration crackdown in the farming system, and she
Oh,
said,
boy.
"Well, she supports the president, and I don't remember the rest of the answer, but in the future we'll have robots doing these jobs." Right? Was the upshot of it.
I will say that for row crops, they're so highly mechanized. I mean, 1 person, 2 people can literally manage thousands of acres. So
But not the
we
specialty crops, not the fruits and vegetables.
not on
Yeah, yeah.
the specialty crops, for sure. Well, and I do wanna say, I'm not as familiar with the pesticide statistics and usage, but I do think one of the big reasons for the gap is just how much food we produce, so I'm not sure acre for acre how different it is, but I do think you're tapping into something which is real, which is that consumers are increasingly watching, documentaries or they're asking questions or they're reading about this, and consumers are asking more questions about, like, how their food is raised, especially compared to Europe. There seems to be this really big focus right now on, like, the ways the US food system is different from Europe, and there are a lot of differences, and so this seems like this very salient political argument right now, which is kind of interesting seeing it come from Republicans because Republicans have always been like, "Europe's terrible," or like, "The socialists," right? And so now it's interesting to peel back and be like, "Well, maybe we like some of their food stuff." Still don't want the healthcare, but that's a whole other ball of wax,
among
right?
other
So it's
among
been
other things that
interesting,
are in
like,
the news
watching that.
related to Europe right now, but yes, I mean,
Oh, and this is not a foreign
that's
policy
true,
podcast, but
yeah.
yes, a lot of interesting, crazy things happening. So, but that's been, but that I do think that European comparison that's made often, I hear it from Democrats, Republicans, independents. It's not partisan. It is this like increasingly mainstream narrative of like, well, wait, why do I feel better when I walk around and visit Europe? And like, there's lots of theories. Is it less stress? Is it more walking? Is it all better healthcare? All the things. But a lot of people, a lot of Americans, when they visit Europe, notice they feel better, and then vice versa. Europeans complain about our food. So it's like that's a thing that is a real political narrative that I think has taken hold across party, right? And so it'll be interesting to see, like, what does that mean going forward? Do, like, Democrats start I haven't heard a lot from Democrats on a lot of these issues in a while because it has become so partisan lately, but I don't know. It's very interesting. Okay, going back to the conflicts of interest thing, which I should have noted earlier when we were talking about rooting out conflicts of interest at USDA and EPA. I think that is generally true that there's a lot of there's a lot of former lobbyists, like, at USDA and EPA, no question, but there were some concerns raised in the recent dietary guidelines that some of the scientists that helped with the scientific review did have some ties to, I think particularly dairy and livestock groups, and after Kennedy has focused so much on conflicts of interest, I'm curious, like, what you think about that, and then also more generally, like, you're now part of the food industry, you have a protein powder line, which I, like, always see
Reviewed on Wirecutter
out
very
in
favorably. You did
retail.
well on Wirecutter. Yes,
Oh,
I
is
saw
it?
there you were
Oh,
in the, I can't remember what the
that
category they were looking at Wirecutter,
I
and,
forget Wirecutter
they were
does
like, "Oh, yeah,
food.
that's one
That's
of the ones you can try
okay.
and not die from."
So setting that aside, you're now also part of the food industry, so, like, how do you think about this idea of conflicts of interest? And like, it is a common refrain we hear, it's a common criticism we hear within MAHA that, like, a lot of people are also within MAHA are also maybe selling a wellness program, like, Mark Hyman and Function Health or protein powder or whatever, like, it does seem to get complicated and blurry. Like, how do you think about conflicts of interest and this criticism that is often leveled to say, like, "Oh, like, this is hypocritical because we're mad about this conflicts of interest, but there's also conflicts of interest within MAHA, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's funny because it's like, I have this hat that says big wellness and it's
You have a
just
hat.
yeah, the hat that says big wellness and we all wear it as a joke because it's like, it's like big food versus big wellness,
Yeah.
right? And, when you look down to, if you look into why people created their wellness businesses, it usually it was to solve a need that they had. Like with Function Health, I would say, Mark wanted to make it easier to have all these biomarkers that people could make better decisions about their lifestyle, right? With my protein powder, it was the one thing that I used as fast food when I didn't have time to sit down for a meal. And it's like all the protein powders out there had natural flavors and guar gum and xanthan gum and artificial sweeteners and other additives that I didn't want to put in my body. I was like, why can't I get a good tasting protein powder without any of these additives? There's got to be a way that we can do this. And we did it at True Bonnie. We proved that you don't have to have all of those unnecessary ingredients in your protein powder to have a good tasting protein powder. And so I also wanted to make it organic and non-GMO and have like the highest quality so that when I'm having my fast food, in the middle of the day when I don't have time to sit down for a meal, I feel good about it, right? And and so we're all solving a need in the marketplace for people to feel better, right? Whereas the conflicts of interest that exist within Washington to prevent certain things from happening are actually making people more sick. And I think about Bayer's influence at the top levels of government and Bayer's, I mean, the fact that they sell a product that causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and then sells the cure to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, sells the medicine that somebody would take to fix that type of cancer. That's insane, right? That's insane to have anybody like that having a conflict of interest at the top of government making decisions on how things are regulated, right? So, it's not just, blanketly throwing around this word conflicts of interest. It's actually what it makes sense for an agency to make sound decisions based on human health and to take away any influence from industry, then we should be doing that, right? But when it comes to people like me who, that again, I'm on the outside. I don't work for the administration. I want people to eat more real food. And when you look at the integrity behind that statement and the integrity of what I do and what I fight for, it's to get people to eat healthier, right? Now
So
I
it
have
sounds like what you're saying is, like, take it case by case,
yeah,
look at the, like,
exactly.
what they're selling. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily, like, selling something is the problem. It's, like, not being clear about it. I think the concern with the dietary guidelines has been the lack of transparency around the conflicts of interest and which individuals had conflicts or at least perceived conflicts of interest, and
Yeah.
it's hard too because on the nutrition side, the reason there's so much industry funding is there's not very much federal funding. And so industry comes to like fill the gap. And that's why you have all these studies that are funded by industry. And if you read Marianne Nestle's food politics blog, she does like a regular
Yeah.
series where she like flags industry funded studies and like lo and behold, they never find they never show something that's, like, bad for the funder, right? Like, so it's, like, this persistent thing that we see in food, and I do think it is a real concern, and I don't know, I'm hearing much more awareness from consumers about it. I mean, I think there is a lot more scrutiny, which is probably good, right? Like, scrutiny is
So
good.
No, I think it's great.
I'm gonna change
Yeah.
gears a little bit. We are coming a little closer to the end, and, we're gonna do our final segment of what we normally do on the show, something called the good vibes, and it's these are complicated times, and it's always nice to have one thing in the food and politics world that you can or at least the food world that you can point to and say, "I could take a little hope out of that." And we all Helena and I do this each time. Uh, we're gonna ask you to do it as well. I know you had a little bit of a struggle to come up with a hopeful note to go at it. So I'll go first, if that'll help. All right. So
Yeah, you go first,
yes,
Ted.
in these dark days, I always like a good yogurt, and I just discovered I find this very funny to me because, like, my wife is from Japan. We'll travel there, and you'll eat. There's amazing food there. Everything you eat there is amazing. But you'll also meet somebody in Japan. They'll say, "Well, we make the best brie cheese in the world here in Japan," and you'll be a little shocked. Like, you really think in Japan they make the best brie cheese? But they do oftentimes. And the one that I discovered that
That's a
it
hot
is a
take,
hot
Ted.
take, but go
That's
there.
a hot
You could meet
take.
the average Japanese person on the street, they will tell you that all the food that they make there, whatever kind of cuisine, it's the best. And I think they're right. That's a hot take. That's my hot take for the day. But my good vibe is something I just discovered in the grocery store, Bulgarian yogurt, which is a different category. I've heard of Greek, I've heard of flavored, I've heard of all kinds of yogurt. I've never heard of Bulgarian before. It's a little extra sour, it's a little salty. Damn, it was good.
Mm,
I liked it. Yes.
salty.
All right, so that's
Okay.
my good vibe.
Okay, I'll go next. I didn't have one coming in, but I thought of one. I think my good vibe right now is that more because of the dietary guidelines revamp and all of the noise around it, mixed reaction, lots of positive vibes around the eat real food, consume less ultra processed foods. A lot of criticism around some of the other details, which we should do a whole episode on. But the thing I think is really great about this is it's getting more people to talk about school meals, which is a program these programs that I have covered for 15 years that, like, nobody cares about. I mean, nobody like the national conversation, the national press does not focus on these issues. These programs are so important. They serve tens of millions of kids every day, and I think we're about to see more focus and conversation and debate around them. It sorta does take me back to my Michelle Obama days where I was covering this, and, it was, I think, briefly a time where we focused on it, although, of course, Republicans hated it back then, but we're in a different time now, so maybe we'll see a different political debate, but just focusing on it, talking about it, debating it, I think is good because it's a lot of kids, a lot of food. I got school-age kids. I know, Vani, you do too. Like, you see some of the stuff that's served, and it's not what Japan is serving their kids, I'll
It's
tell you
not.
that.
They're
So
they're they're v they're eating
we
good stuff in their schools. So,
we can, we can improve. Let's say that.
Bonnie, I
So,
hate to put you on the spot too much, but maybe just a little bit. Do you have a good
No, it's
vibe?
okay.
what's your good vibe?
So when the new upside down food pyramid came out, I was really thrilled with the graphic. I think the graphic is so beautiful and I love how big the broccoli is. It's like so big. And the day it came out, I, of course, made broccoli for my son, and he kinda, like, left it on his plate, he didn't really eat it right away, and I showed him the graphic of the upside down pyramid, and I said, "Look, this is the new dietary guidelines from the United States government. Look how big the broccoli is on here. Look how important it is," and he was just like he just all he had to do was see that visual, which is now on my fridge, and he just ate up, like, all of this broccoli. It was just the most beautiful moment, and I'm, like, thinking how just this is just based on what you just said, Helena, and it's like, how many kids can we impact with this message of, like, eating real food, and it's just it's so incredible, but my feel-good moment, and it makes you literally feel good, is the sauerkraut that I found at Whole Foods recently that I am obsessed with this brand. Like, it is so good.
Okay, well, now you have to share what brand, but only if you don't have a financial conflict of
I
interest
do
with that.
not have a financial conflict of interest. I should get
You
one.
you
I
will
should
very
reach out to
soon,
Tell
I
me the
think.
brand.
sponsor
I'm
me.
gonna write it
But
down.
they should sponsor me. It's called Cultured Traditions. I mean, it's such
Okay.
a no-name
Cultured
brand, but
traditions, okay.
Cultured Traditions. It's organic, and they have a variety of different flavors. They have like a Russian style. They have a garlic pickle that is insane. I mean, it's so good. It's like eating
Mm.
pickles. And they
Love
also have
pickles.
like a
Mm.
beet version of it with the beet juice, and oh, it's so good. So one thing I've been doing, which we can go back to the dietary guidelines, they for the first time recommended fermented foods, which is incredible. And fermented foods are so good for your body. It's like good for your immune system, especially right now in cold and flu season, like to have just a little bit every single day. And all I do is take like 2 or 3 tablespoons and just add it to my dinner plate, no matter what we're having. And I'll eat that first almost. And
News you can
Fermented
use.
foods, yes, now
yes,
we
I
know.
know. And it is so good, and I swear it's kept me I mean, so far so good from getting sick this
Don't knock don't
season.
no, don't don't jinx yourself, buddy. Your kids are gonna bring home something gnarly now.
So,
No,
Don't
no,
say
I
now we
can't.
know
And
sauerkraut is good, and
but it's I think it's the best form of probiotics, right? Like, that you
Okay.
can get. And this is going against my financial interest because Truvani does have a probiotics that we sell, but I think this is the most bioavailable way to do it is by eating sauerkraut and kimchi and fermented foods and fermented vegetables. So, anyways, I love it. I think it's
Alright.
so I think we're gonna
delicious.
start to wrap it up from there. Helena, I know you have this great newsletter.
We don't have sponsors
We
for
don't
this
have sponsor for this
podcast,
podcast.
Ted, but we
Maybe
might
we will, they
now.
should come talk to
You
us.
should go
I
get
will
these
say,
people.
I'm gonna ask Helena to talk about her newsletter, and then we'll say goodbye, but before we do that,
Oh, yeah.
as soon as I get off this, I'm gonna well, tonight, when my kids are at home, I'm gonna tell them about what you said, Vani, and I'll be like, her kids were thinking about broccoli when they looked at the upside down pyramid, and all you guys could see was a ribeye. Yeah, well, I don't know, we
They wanted a ribeye?
yes. So,
Children everywhere will use it
that
as they see
exactly.
see
So,
fit.
Helena, tell me
Um
about this newsletter of yours.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so anyone who's listening who's not reading Food Fix, go to foodfix.co, get on the list. You can read it every Friday for free and upgrade if you want more. Yeah, I think most people at this point, Ted, should be reading the newsletter, but definitely fix it if you're not.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Helena. Thank you so much, Vani. This was a very interesting conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk to us. And Helena, I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right, see you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to American Dish. Please take a minute to both subscribe and leave a review wherever you're listening. This ensures you never miss an episode, and it helps more people find this podcast. Also, be sure to check out Forked, the food politics podcast I co-host with the Food and Environment Reporting Network. If you're interested in these topics and you're not already getting my weekly newsletter Food Fix, go to foodfix.co and get on the list. It's a must-read for consumers and policy insiders alike, and it's free. Special thanks to Adrian Cruz, who manages this podcast, and my late dad, David Bodemiller, who wrote the music you're listening to well before I was born. We'll see you next time.